Okay, good morning and welcome to the People and Health Overview Committee of the 24th of October. Before we start, if I can ask members of the committee to introduce themselves, and we'll start this side of the room.
Good morning, I'm Councillor Pete Barrow, representing Radipole Ward in Weymouth.
Good morning, I'm Councillor Beryl Ezard from Wareham Ward.
Good morning, Stella Jones, Dorchester East.
Jean Nancy.
Roll.
Good morning. It's not working.
It's Tony Alford and I represent Egerton.
Good morning, I'm Councillor Cathy Lugg, Ferndown North.
Pauline Batstone, Blackmore Vale Ward.
And I'm Councillor Mike Parks, Ferndown North, and also Chairman of this committee. Okay, we move to item 1, which is apologies.
Good morning. We have apologies from Councillor Rebecca Knox and from Councillor Ryan Holloway.
Thank you. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations of interest or anything on the agenda today? I'll take the silence as no. If anything crops up as we go along, please declare it. Okay, item 3 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of September. They've all been circulated. Does anyone have any comments or issues with those? Could I have a proposal that we accept those minutes, please? And seconded by, so that was proposed by Councillor Ezard, seconded by Councillor Dunseith. All in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. Public participation, there is none. And there are no questions from members. There are no urgent items, so we move on to the main agenda item of today, which is the Birth to Settled Adulthood Independent Chairman's Update. And before we invite the Chairman to speak from, he's in Boston currently, I'm going to ask Councillor Somper to introduce this item.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, Councillor Somper, I'm the lead member on adult services and leading on the Birth to Settled Adulthood programme. Sorry. I'm delighted that Mark Rogers, who's the independent chair of Birth to Settled Adulthood Board, is here today to provide an update to the committee on the important work that has been underway in this space. Showing this is very much about co-production, that adults and children's services have been working alongside each other with partners in health and parent carer council and others, including education and schools, all to improve the experience of young people and their families by working together at an early stage in people's preparation for adulthood. This work will improve their future and giving them opportunities to fulfill their hopes and dreams in the same way that everybody does and everybody should. The report will highlight the areas of progress as well as some that are still being fine-tuned, and it's helpful that the project now has a programme director in place who will bring all the work that has been done so far in shaping the programme and drive it forward so that we can begin to see real progress and tangible improvements for our young adults and their families as they move through children's services into adult services with the right support in place from health and education, employment colleagues and other partners. I have always made it clear that what I wanted to see was a seamless service across all agencies working together, where stories did not need repeating to the different teams, and it does feel that we are getting very much closer to that. Thank you very much, Chairman. I think Mark has got his, or someone's got the slides.
Turn the mic off.
Okay, Mark, the floor's yours. I'll allow the guys here to sort the presentation out, and then we'll go from there.
Great, thank you. So thank you, George. I appear to have been able to take control of the presentation as well, so that's much appreciated. Mr. Chairman, good morning. Committee, good morning, and thank you very much for giving me some time to give you this update. Councillor Somper has already done a very good job actually of stealing a great deal of the thunder, but I will continue nonetheless. So I think the first slide is actually symbolically important, even though it's got very little on it, because it's intended to represent the importance of having a very strong partnership across the council and the NHS endorse it. So whilst there are very few words on that slide, I think it does symbolise one of the most important things that this piece of work is about, which is forging and sustaining a strong partnership for the benefit of the young children and young people that we're talking about. I will move through quickly. Again, introductory slide. So this committee is as clear as any, I think, about the reasons for this piece of work. Last year, an independent consultant was commissioned to do what I think many parents and carers actually would say is another piece of work, but nonetheless a piece of work to better understand exactly what the challenges are in relation to children, young people and families across that age group of 0 to 25. And that piece of work came to your committee, I understand, a year ago, just over a year ago now, making a number of recommendations about how to improve pathways and services for this group of children and young people. And it's an important scene setter. I'm not going to go through that report because you will have seen it, obviously, and deliberated upon it, and I understand fully supported it. I think what is important to note, because there is also work still continuing in this space, is that whilst there's this ambition to make long-term sustainable changes which will be for the better of children and young people, also there is the ongoing challenge of ensuring that those children and young people in the system now are well served. So the Birth to Settled Adulthood programme has alongside it what's called a recovery and improvement programme as well, which is intended to ensure that, as I say, those children and young people already receiving services either from the council and or the NHS endorse it, get as good a service as they possibly can in the here and now. I'm not going to spend any more time on the detail on that slide. I'm very happy to come back to any of it if the committee would find it helpful. This slide just gives you a little bit of context over the last few years, and what it illustrates is the point that I've just made, which is, to use a phrase, the work needs to address both stock and flow. What I mean by that is that there are children and young people who are already in need of services and they're not necessarily receiving that which they fully deserve. And the situation that's reflected in this slide is a live and real situation now. So hence the importance of the Recovery and Improvement Programme. The vision for a new service came out of last year's work by the independent consultant. There's a lot of words on this slide, but if you want a view from me, the most important thing that can be done is to forge and sustain a very strong partnership of all those organisations that have a role to play in the lives of these children and young people. And for that partnership to be clear that we are looking at the pathways from 0 to 25. This is not a young person's and a young adult's transition programme. This is 0 to 25, a programme predominantly focused on children with special educational needs and disabilities, and recognising that whilst many of the youngsters will be known and very well known to services already, that there's an intention to ensure that the new pathways and services go beyond just the basic statutory requirements and that nobody actually falls through the gap in the future. So this is ensuring that there are a set of seamless, to use the jargon, but seamless pathways so that children are assessed, that plans are made for them and services provided all in a timely fashion and right the way through their lives should they need that. You can see at the bottom of this slide just a snapshot really of some of the views that parents have about these matters and the importance of making the difference that the programme is intended to deliver. I think it is fair to say, and if the Dorset Parent Carer Council was here this morning, it would say this work is long overdue, and children are entitled to a much better service than the one that they have received thus far. This slide summarises a number of challenges. Again, I think your committee will be familiar with them. Absolutely describes why the programme is essential. And I think, again, if you picked out key bullet points on here, then they would be the ones about making sure that everybody is working together to design and deliver the new service, and that actually everybody is prepared for the new service design when that eventually comes along. It's possibly worth saying at this point, because you can see on the very bottom bullets that it's still the timing of writing this still refers to the CCG. One of the big challenges and opportunities of this work is that NHS Dorset has come into being. The new Integrated Care Board has come into being just a little earlier in the year, and there's a very sharp focus now in the leadership of the ICB on this particular agenda. So I have some confidence, and I feel largely reassured now that the Council and the NHS will be able to work on this programme in a much more integrated and sustainable way for the long term. It's always slightly off-putting seeing your own photograph, isn't it? So I do apologise if anybody is trying to make the match between the picture and the person who's actually on your screen and wondering if they're the same one. So my background very quickly, because I'd rather talk about the programme than my background, but for 17 years I taught in special education. I worked with children with severe learning difficulties and profound and multiple learning difficulties. So I think part of the reason I'm here as independent chair is I have that background. But also secondly, I've done a lot of work in local authorities in this space of trying to support children and young people better who have additional needs. And I've worked in a number of councils over the years, and I've had also a stint actually in the civil service, albeit in Jersey, not in the UK. So I think I bring a set of public service skills and public service experiences that I hope will help the transformation programme. I think it's important to be clear why I've been appointed, so not just about my expertise and experience, but what the role of the chair here is for. So I am supporting and challenging this new partnership to make sure it has the highest ambition possible for children and young people. I do have experience that I hope to bear on this programme and help to ensure that the very best redesign is embarked upon and put into place. I think it's really important that the board that I chair keeps a keen oversight on whether things are changing for the better in the short, medium and long term for children and young people and their families. And of course, I want to make sure that the partnership remains strong and tight. I have a strategic role. The board I chair has a strategic role. We meet approximately 6 weekly, and essentially we are there to be assured or otherwise that the work programmes are progressing at the pace that they need to, and if there are issues that need resolving that can't be resolved elsewhere, that they are done around that board. The board being populated by officers from the council and from the ICB, who are decision makers. The board is supported by a programme board, which Director of Children's Services, Teresa Levy, chairs, and that also meets 6 weekly, and it meets in advance of the main board in order to ensure that we get up-to-date reporting. You'll see here some of the early priorities that the board has been overseeing. Again, I'm not going to go through these in great detail. You've had the presentation in advance, and I'm sure that there are specifics in here that you might want to pick up as comments or questions a little bit later. But most importantly, I guess we are looking to ensure that we do win and hold on to the hearts and minds of everybody concerned here, but particularly the children and the families for whom this work is intended to benefit. I've mentioned already that there is work on children and young people in the system now who need to get a better service than they have been having, as well as looking to designing a new set of pathways and services. All of that work remains in scope and all of that work remains ongoing. this is a colourful and busy slide, but I think it's designed to inform and hopefully reassure the committee that whilst there is much activity underway, there's also a keen eye on measuring in a number of ways the difference that is being made. As this scorecard is finalised, and it won't be finalised until the end of this year or just the beginning of next, I've been clear and the board has been clear that whilst it's obviously wanting to see performance indicators, I guess that you might be well familiar with, we also want to make sure that we're tracking what I would call sentiment. So not just hard metrics that tell you whether there's more of this or less of that and whether things are being done on time, all of which matters, but also tracking how, again, children, young people, their parents and carers, and crucially the workforce feel about the changes, and actually whether the kind of the finger in the air test, if you like, suggests that this is a much better set of pathways and services than Dorset previously used to have. So they're going to be hard measures and sentiment measures in the balanced scorecard. This slide sets out some of the progress that has been made so far. I think as chair, what I would say to the committee is, since January, the programme has basically been in the process of getting established. It may seem that it's quite a long period of time that it's taken to get established, but during that time, the council itself has had to understand and identify and deploy the set of people and resources that it needs to be able to make progress with this. But also the NHS, as we can't fail to notice, has gone through its latest reorganisation, and it has really taken until the summer for the NHS to be in a sufficiently settled position, I think, to properly and authentically commit to this work. Again, I don't intend to go through the detail of the update on this slide, but what I think I do want to do is, as Councillor Somper said, actually sort of reassure the committee that a strong partnership has come together and is now able, in short order, to start to focus on the redesign work, which obviously is crucial to the future of what's going to be done through this programme. Final slide looks at the current focus, and what I actually want to do is fine. The information on here correct at the time of publishing, as they say, but I just wanted to be further clear with the committee and actually refer to the report that you also have that sits alongside this presentation. But there are 4 core areas that, as chair of this board, we are focused on in the coming weeks and months. So the first of them is we need to understand the overall, i.e. the whole system financial strategy for this piece of work. It's clear that if there's going to be the redesign of pathways and services, that the funding of those new pathways and services needs to be understood. That is work in progress. There's been an initial report to the board on the financial strategy, but there's still much more work to be done on that. So one of our big priorities is to keep track of the investment that is going to be made across the system, across the partnership, to ensure that children and young people get the new services that they need and that they're sustainable. Secondly, and obviously, I think because it's connected to that, the work on service redesign needs to commence, sort of fully commence. The groundwork has been underway for a while. A whole range of service mapping has been undertaken to ensure that all of those services that need to play their part in the future, even if they are reconfigured, redesigned, are identified and the cost of them understood. But the board expects to see and will be seeing reports here on in that describe proposals for how the new service should look and operate. The third priority is around ensuring that the workforce is prepared for the future that it's going to have to deliver. That's been a focus all through the year, and there has been excellent work undertaken to ensure that all of those people who will be part of whatever this new thing looks like know that they're going to be and are starting to be prepared for the integrated working that will be necessary. And then finally, I've been keen to ensure that there is really good communication about the work as it starts to become much more tangible, and there are things that we can tell parents and carers in particular about what the future may look like. Running through all of this, it kind of relates particularly to the second priority of redesigning the pathways and services, is ensuring that appropriately children, young people and their families are involved in that redesign work. So, Chairman, I've gone at a reasonably brisk pace, preferring, I think, to ensure that there's plenty of time for comments and questions. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rogers. That's very, very helpful, and I think gives quite a comprehensive introduction to what no doubt will be something that we'll see at this committee a number of times. But do members have any comments or questions? Councillor Ezard.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mark, if I may call you that. Councillor Beryl Ezard, Wareham Ward. Yes, a couple of things. Democratic Services did send us out this slide set last week, so I managed to look through it. And there's a couple of things that I'd like to ask about. It says in the second bullet point on the, I think it was the slide, I think it was slide number 2, about the due to the Care Act 2014, and I think it was the second bullet point if I go back. Is it the second? No, it's the next one. Slide 4.
Is this under the vision?
Slide 3 or slide 4, where it says there's a difference, a disparity between whether they are, you know, the children actually as they become adult are under the Care Act 2014, but will benefit from support into adulthood in that regard. So there's a disparity between where they fall under the different things. I'm trying to look at which slide I saw it under, actually. I thought
slide 5, I think, is the one you're referring to.
Oh, there we are. There's slide 5. Yeah, that's right. The second bullet point, it says at the end of that, however, we know that the young adults that are supporting those with additional needs up to the age of 25, they may not require ongoing intervention into adult services, as well as some young adults who wouldn't routinely be entitled to services due to the Care Act, but will benefit from the support into adulthood up to 25. So is there a disparity between which service? It is almost as if there's two different services. So could we answer that? I've got a couple of other queries as well.
Of course. So I think the issue that you're teasing out here is that there are different legislative frameworks that apply either to children or to young people and adults, and that, you know, that is the case. It's a fact that there is different legislation, and it isn't always fully aligned. But the point that's being made in that slide, the point, I'm not sure, sorry, can you still hear me? Yeah, so I carry on.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so sorry. So I think, so there's a recognition that there are different pieces of legislation that it's necessary to take into account in this programme. However, the point that's being made in the slide is that legislation is not going to get in the way of making sure that those youngsters who need a service, whether or not they strictly always fall within the legislative frameworks, either of children and adults, that does not get in the way of them being assessed, planned for and receiving services if they need to. I think it's one of the important principles of this programme that whilst there are definitions around which children and young people are most likely to be covered by the new pathways and services, senior officers in particular are keen to ensure that no gaps exist in that provision simply because of a technicality about which piece of legislation you might fall under.
Yes, it's falling into the gap between the two, isn't it? That makes sure we've got joined up thinking there.
Absolutely.
Further one. Yes, I think slide 4, there was yes, that's right. These 17-year-old special education. No, I think that sorry, that's on slide 4. No, it's slide 8 I'm going on to now, sorry. Slide 8.
Okay.
Oh yes, where it says that there is a backlog of 77 outstanding, how do you prepare to, or propose to catch up on the backlog for assessments on where that particularly says, and I can't think where it is, it's here, it mentions it. Yes, there is the first bullet point after number 2, priority action with immediate activity. Yes, can I ask that question, please? And also at the bottom there on the third bullet point on there, it says cooperation with a member of the B2SAB. What is that acronym? Thank you.
Of course. So let's do the easy bit first. So I apologise for the acronym. There are too many in here, aren't there? But B2, that's basically the Birth to Settled Adulthood Board. We have, I guess, for shorthand, Councillor just used the initials, but it's Birth to Settled Adulthood Board. I think the substantive point you make about the backlogs, and I'm aware that there are officers in the chamber as well who may wish to kind of add to this, but we have recognised that whilst we want to deliver this big transformation programme, that there are children and young people in the system. Now, that number changes week by week as children come in and out of the system for their transition assessments. But the recovery and improvement programme has been put together to ensure that those children who need attention now get it, whilst also ensuring that we design the new services for the future. So that's essentially what that bullet point is saying, is that there is a backlog, there has been a backlog, and there continues to be work to reduce and address that backlog. And it's undertaken in a separate group called the Recovery and Improvement Group.
If I can contribute, my name's Julia Ingram. I'm head of locality services, and the transitions team as it currently exists sits within my remit. We've been working very collaboratively across children and adults to try and resolve this issue around both the backlog and those assessments which haven't yet been completed. We've seconded some additional capacity across from children's social care and also targeted some additional resources into the transitions team to make sure that we are picking up those cases. We're targeting particularly, we've drilled down into the detail on 36 young people and targeted 18 in particular, where they are either aged 18 already or approaching 18, where we know we've got to do some catch-up work to make sure that we're really delivering those outcomes. And we're using that opportunity also to identify skills and training gaps across our teams. And the work that was alluded to in the presentation around the Power BI performance report becomes critical, because as we learn where our gaps are, we are developing a Power BI performance report that will give us early indicators where we need to change our practice early. So it will help us to identify young people earlier in the process where we can do more detailed work, because every young person has a different journey and every young person needs a slightly different level of input and intervention. And so we're learning as we go along, we're making those adjustments as we go along. So that in the future we'll be smarter at picking up those people and hopefully reduce the likelihood of any kind of backlog developing.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, Councillor Lugg.
Yeah, I've got a comment and a couple of questions. I think this work's really, really important, not just from the point of view of the 0 to 25s, but what happens after that they're already known to us. Because I'm aware that we've got a whole cohort of people with learning disabilities and physical disabilities that are not known to us over that age group. and won't be known to us until they come to the attention of social services sometime later on in life. So it's really important that we get to know these people early. The questions are, how confident are we that the young person's voice is heard independent of the parents and carers? And what support is there for the parent and carers to let go? Because they've cared for this young person for a long time, very protectively in a lot of cases, and it's very difficult for them to, to see that person go on to independence, and they don't always agree with the plans for them.
So if I pick that question up in the first instance, Chair, so you have touched on one of the themes in this work that I think I'm also most interested in, which is ensuring that we are hearing from children, young people and their parents and carers about exactly what it is that they expect to see out of this service redesign work. At each of the board meetings, I ensure that we have... Oh, okay. I think I've got a time lag. Shall I carry on speaking? Or...
Yes, yep, carry on, please.
Apologies, sorry, I can't quite tell always when it's finished at your end and I need to start. So Councillor has picked up on one of the most important points, so far as I'm concerned, as chair of this board, which is we need to ensure that we have arrangements in place that are genuine engagement and co-production arrangements for children and young people. And as I also said earlier, they're parents and carers as well. The board gets a report at every meeting about work that is being done to ensure that that engagement is underway. And I'd like to give the committee some reassurance that the board also has representation from the Dorset Parent Carer Council as well. So we are being held to account also by, kind of families representative body for the extent to which they are being appropriately and in a timely way involved in this work. I couldn't agree more. I think also your broader point about, readiness for kind of adulthood isn't just about the young person themselves, is it? It's about the wider family context in which they're growing up. And this work needs to take into account how parents and carers are given the reassurance and the confidence that at the appropriate time, the greater levels of independence can be exercised by their young person. And I think a lot of that will come down to, as the service redesign work really kicks in and families start to see what the new pathways and the new services look like, if they are confident in them, then the likelihood of them being more confident in supporting their youngsters' independence will come through. But a lot of what we do with children and young people with additional needs is actually about giving parents support and sufficient support to feel confident that what the future holds is something that they can cope with. So this isn't an exact science, but I think the combination of involving families in the work and making sure, therefore, that the new services are ones that they want and look forward to will help with that challenge.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Claire Shields. I'm the Corporate Director for Commissioning and Partnerships and Children's Services and leading, alongside others, some pieces of this work as well. I think there's a few other points to make around children and young people's voice. One is operationally involving them in annual reviews. So when we're working on education, health and care plans, really important for us that we're hearing from the young people directly themselves and that planning early. Quite important. That we have advocacy services in place as well, that we can make sure that we get that right for children and young people and that we have the right level of that advocacy available to us, which is a piece of work we're picking up within the commissioning work stream as well. And then we have a range of opportunities for children and young people to tell us what type of services and what type of need that they have going forward. And a really important point about information, advice and guidance, and both making that available for parents and carers, but our children and young people as well as they're moving through the system. And some great work with special schools, helping them understand and talk to young people about what options and opportunities there are available for life into the future. So a range of ways, both strategically and then really getting in at operation hearing directly from children, young people themselves. And I think something for all of us to have really high ambition for our young people. You know, we just want to be there. We want to make sure that Dorset is a really good place to grow up if you have additional needs. And so other pieces of work like an accessibility strategy to make Dorset more welcoming and the places that we have more welcoming for themselves, so that they can have that high ambition for them and that they can see the possibilities into the future too.
Councillor Barrow.
Good morning. Thanks, Chair. Councillor Pete Barrow, Radipole Ward in Weymouth. Apologies, this might be a slightly rambling question. I'm a member of the Schools Forum. I've been a school governor now for about 8 years, local primary school. And I've got family members who've got SEND, 3 of whom are on EHCPs. So I've been on the receiving end of the services you're talking about. And in the role as a school governor, I've been on the delivery end of trying to make sure that children in the school that I'm a governor of are receiving the best possible help. And it's not easy, especially from the school setting. You know, you can't pretend that the financial implications aren't really, really difficult in making sure that all the children we have in our school who've got SEND are receiving the best possible service, because it's always a balance. So in the work that you're doing, especially given that the schools are now so fragmented with the academies, I'm not making a point there, it's just they are fragmented. How are you interacting with the schools to make sure that they can actually deliver what it is you want them to deliver? How does that work? And at what sort of level, especially around the strategic side of things, does that sit?
So I don't think that's a rambling question at all. It's a really good question. And initially, there are 2 responses that I'd make. So the first thing to say is that we have, albeit only recently, secured schools representation on this board. And secondly, the new Dorset Education Board, which Stephen Twigg is chairing and is looking, amongst other things, at the extent to which children with additional needs are well supported in the system now. I've been asked to join that board as well, and the Dorset Parent Carer Council also sits on both boards too. So I think in sort of governance terms, we've got 2 boards, this one, Birth Settled Adulthood, and the Dorset Education Board, that are working alongside each other and are making sure that they interact through shared membership, so that issues that need to be addressed either in the education space or in the 0 to 25 space actually get picked up and led on by the right board. So I think that's probably the most important thing I can say at this point, is that we have made sure that different work streams in different boards are actually getting connected up. And I think also kind of officers in the room will be able to explain a little bit more of the detail, I guess, about what's going on within the programme board, which is the board that the Children's Director chairs, to ensure that those particular pieces of work that arise in the education space are actually factored into the work programme of this board.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Barrow. And just to say, the Corporate Director for Education and Learning, Vic Fernborough, is part of the board and part of the work programme moving forward. And we'll make sure we make appropriate links into the Schools Forum and other pieces of work. It is really important to us that this is more than just how we deliver our services internally, and we're looking outwards to see how we connect and we make that work together. And we have our eyes to the new SEND review and what that looks like in terms of policy delivery and development moving forward as well. So lots of opportunity for us to connect this work up together, the right people around the table to do that, to be able to move it forward, and really an improvement picture around EHCPs and timeliness and more annual reviews happening, so we can see some of the practice improvements of things that are already been moving, so that we can move this forward, and a real priority around those age 14 education, health and care plan reviews. We know we should be talking about it right from birth, but if we really get it right around that age 14 time, we know we're planning well and into the future. So lots of work alongside others to make that work on the ground as well.
Thank you. Councillor Batstone. Oh, sorry. Apologies.
Should have asked you. I just wanted to add to that, there's been some as-is pathway mapping over the summer, because you don't know, if you don't know what's currently happening, you don't make the changes in the right places. And so there were a series of workshops over the summer, 6 in total, which included a whole range of stakeholders, and education was a key part of that. And there have been visits in recent weeks to the schools, so I absolutely support what you're saying, that education is a key part of that, and there's been some very practical steps already to understand how it is now, and therefore from that what we need to do differently moving forward.
Just to come back, I mean, it's very good to hear all of that, and thank you very much. But just to make one final point, all of your grand plans eventually at some point arrive in a local primary school and need to be, we need to deliver. And it's just my real worry is that that isn't, the capacity to do that isn't there when it's needed. So just as we could pick all of that up. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Batstone.
Pauline Batstone, Blackmore Vale. I think the discussion this morning exemplifies just how complex the situation is. And if you're a parent trying to understand the pathway, the route for your child, I think you must tear your hair out. There's an old saying that says, fine words, butter, no parsnips. And I'm interested not only in what Kathy said about listening to young people and the parents, but also our staff, because our ambassadors, the people who are going to deliver this, are our staff out there going through so-and-so's door, trying to explain what is going on. We'll know we've succeeded when counsellors no longer get parents on the phone saying, I'm fighting children's services for my child, because so often we do get that. How are we working to take our staff with us to make sure they're communicating appropriately and caringly with those parents and carers and young people who are the ones on the receiving end? Because, as I say this morning, the discussion is high level, very complex, but it's the grassroots that bother me.
So, Chair, I'll make a couple of observations, and then I'm pretty sure that officer colleagues in the room might want to add to what I have to say. So, when I mentioned a little earlier in terms of priority areas, workforce is absolutely one of them. The kind of understanding of the changes that are to come, getting buy-in to that, is going to be essential going forwards. So there has been a good amount of work undertaken to make sure that staff across children's and adults, and increasingly in the NHS system as well, understand the work that is being taken forward here, have the opportunity to have a say on that work and their ideas factored into the plans for change, along with also undertaking kind of joint professional development alongside each other. We had the question earlier, didn't we, about the different legislative frameworks, and that issue came up quite early in this change programme for me, and the way to resolve all those kind of differences of experience and practice and legislation and get ready for the future is for all of the workforce that's going to be part of these new pathways and services to be coming together on a regular basis to be given information, but also to comment on in the way that we expect to get children, young people and families to comment on whether we're getting the new model right. So that's kind of the high level answer for you, that across the workforce there is engagement going on, views are being sought, and learning and development, joint learning and development is taking place across children's, adults and into the NHS. But I'm sure there's colleagues in the room who can sort of give you some granularity to that if you kind of want examples specifically of what's been done. Although I can say that just earlier in the summer I was part of webinars of kind of de rigueur these days, aren't they? But there was a whole staff webinar held in August with amazingly good turnout, frankly, actually, given that it was August and kind of thought probably quite a lot of people would be away on leave, because people are also interested in this work and wanting to know what the plans are and how they can contribute. So there are things that are well underway, and preparing the workforce, as I said earlier, is one of the priorities that the board's keeping a close eye on. Chair,
if I may come in there with a little more detail on that. The workforce activity is being led by the principal social workers from both children's social care and adult social care, and they're really key in terms of developing standards in practice. And we've identified already where some of the gaps are in terms of our practice knowledge, so things like the Mental Capacity Act and that transition from continuing care funding for children into continuing healthcare funding for adults. And so we've set out, with the learning and development teams, we're setting out a programme of education. We've started that already, as I say, by seconding social workers from children's social care into a transitions team. We're also doing joint training sessions. As the Chair has said, we've had one very successful workshop or presentation across that whole workforce across children's and adults, and we will continue to do that education. So it's going to be a combination of drip feed work, but also some of those big stories and pictures.
Thank you. Councillor Alford.
Thank you. Tony Alford, Egerton Ward. I fully support everything that's being done with this project, and I appreciate the immense complexity involved. And I just take two examples, one of which is service redesign, which was mentioned, another of which was talking about working in partnership. You know, these are pieces of work that take quite some time to develop and put in place, and there are many others. And so I appreciate the tasks that officers and supporters are, taking here. They're working very, very hard, and it's all appreciated. The question I have is a variation of the old question of what does success look like? And in this case, I would look at something like, how will people like us be able to recognize that we've delivered the sort of service with the sort of objectives that we've set out in this document? And when do you think we would be able to do that?
So thank you. That's an excellent question. And I think probably I will start, but I suspect Claire Shields might want to say a little bit on this as well. So let's come back to the balanced scorecard, which sounds like a jolly good sort of piece of officer jargon, doesn't it? But the balanced scorecard fundamentally will do two things that I think will help answer your question. So the first is it will contain a set of performance indicators, measures, whatever language you want to use, that are calibrated against the best practice in relation to these services that we're talking about. So whether it's, excuse me, sorry. So I don't know whether, for example, it's the time it takes to undertake an assessment, or the time it takes to deliver a service, for example. There will be those kind of measures which I'm sure you are kind of very familiar with. And I know that you use the Power BI system to kind of track important metrics for key areas like this one. So that will be one of the ways that things are getting better, kind of hard, objective measures where progress or otherwise can be gauged. The second point I'm going to make, I've made a little earlier as well, which is Oxford Brookes University has been commissioned jointly by children and adults here to develop a set of sentiment measures. And that work for me is as important as the hard metrics that can be used here, because it is designed to take the temperature basically of parent and carer views about whether things are getting better. So it's the softer sense of understanding whether things are improving. Does it feel better? When parents talk to one another, are they saying that things are improving? So putting those two bits of a scorecard together have been really important. The work's taken a little while. Claire and Jonathan have led that work, particularly in the council, but also working with NHS Dorset. So you will see, as I said, either at the end of this year or the beginning of next year, a set of metrics, the nature of which you will recognise, because there will be performance indicators that you can track, and they will be benchmarked as well against best practice so that Dorset can tell whether it's actually leading edge or still catching up, for example. But for me, crucially, we'll also know whether people think it's getting better. And as said earlier, I think it's not just parents and carers. It will be asking questions of children and young people, but also of staff. So you will get a good sense, I think, going into next year as to whether people feel that this work is going to deliver change, as well as being able to measure whether it's going to be delivering change.
Thanks, Mark. And Mark said quite a bit of what I was going to say. So the work that we've been doing is to really get underneath what's important to people. We could measure lots and lots and lots of things, but what's important to people and how will we know that we've made a difference to those? And the work with Oxford Brookes University is going to help give us a level of independence about that. So we're going to talk to people who've been through our system previously, people who are currently going through the system, and people who are planning for adulthood. And we're going to measure that every year. So we've made a commitment to continue to do that so we can see if there's demonstrable change over that period of time. And I think we will also focus on some measures that we've had to create. So there's some things that we just weren't measuring. We weren't measuring some timeliness things. We weren't actually talking to people about how easy is it to find information about entering adulthood and what does that look like. Parents have told us that they're worried about it, just as Councillor Lugg said earlier. They worry about a potential cliff edge. So we'll do some measurements about where do you go for your information, what does that look like, how easy is it. And I hope you will see some impact as well around the number of adults with learning disabilities that are in paid employment, the number that say they're getting access to good health services, and seeing a bit of an improvement in measures of health and well-being for that cohort as well, because we know there are big challenges for them around their both their mental health and other things as well. So we'll measure some of the outcomes of this over time too. So big ambitions to do big strategic things, being efficient in how we deliver our services and making sure that people tell us what we're doing is both the right thing and that it's making a difference for them. So we'll pull that all together, and that's what the balance scorecard's really about.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Yes, Stella Jones, Dorchester East. It's very good all this working together with families and helping everybody to transition from childhood to adulthood. But there are two main things that when you become 18 to 25, you need to be, if possible, have some kind of employment, and you need to have somewhere to live independently. Now, first of all, employment. What are we doing to give kind of career guidance to stop these youngsters becoming neat youngsters? And in housing, we know we have a big problem at looking for accommodation for all sorts of reasons. Are we working with housing officers at all to make sure that there are places for these youngsters to move into so they can become independent?
So, Chairman, I suspect the kind of detail of the question is better picked up by officers, but what I can assure the councillor is that those issues that you have referred to, so careers education and guidance and suitable housing, are both within the scope of this programme, and through the Executive Director Vivian Broadhurst, housing in particular is something that will, I think, become a stronger theme of this work as we progress more and more towards the service redesign. But I think for kind of detail around careers education and guidance, for example, and any immediate sort of short-term housing planning, I need to hand back to officers if that's okay, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Jones, and thanks, Mark. I'll pick up and colleagues might want to add a little bit more detail, but I'll start with the careers education and guidance. So we have two ways of doing that. One, there is a sort of county-wide careers hub, which is developing specialist expertise, and one of those is related to special educational needs and disabilities. So there's guidance and information for schools in about how they meet their responsibilities to do that well. Secondly, we have a small education, employment and training team within Dorset Council Children's Services, which provides information, advice and guidance to children and young people, including those with special educational needs and disabilities. And that is primarily when they're not in employment and education, but we've actually recognised the need to get in front of that a little bit and do a bit more preventative work. And we have pretty good engagement and participation in education, employment and training. Work is the issue that we would want to get more of and more available opportunities. So we do have a contracted service, that Adult Services Commission, which is all about helping people get into work and what that looks like. And I think we could do a bit more about working with employers. So we're having some conversations about how could we work with employers to create both opportunities and to help employers be ready. So there's a bit of work happening around there, but I think we could go further and do a bit more. The second bit around housing, absolutely. It is part of our work programme John and I and adults are working on to make sure that we can identify both the needs, what that looks like, and then commission effectively for it. So we have got some supportive accommodation, but we need to reshape and do a bit more. So that's part of our work plan, and we will make sure that we do that well. And some of that, which has been quite interesting, listening to feedback from young people, is that it doesn't always have to be individual homes. What sometimes they want is group homes and opportunities for doing that. That requires a different way of commissioning, a different way of thinking. So we're just trying to work through what that looks like. But absolutely, a real core part of that commissioning work stream for us is to make sure that there are the right opportunities, including things like shared lives. So we've taken the age range of that down to 16. That used to be 18, which is where family life can be offered to young people as well. So a whole range of different types of accommodation options for us. I know others may want to add to that, but those are some of the things we're working on at the moment.
Thank you. I believe Vivian Broadhouse, who's online, wishes to comment.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies, I keep losing my connection. I just want to say on the housing agenda and the accommodation work stream, I think it's really important that we are having the discussion about our accommodation very much as part of the work that we're doing together. Andrew Billany, our housing director, is very much part of the board, and we're seeing both work and accommodation as absolutely the key to supporting young people to deliver the best ambition we can do for our children and young people in Dorset. So it's really very much woven into this. As Claire has said, you know, we're looking at both right the way through, both how do you support somebody to remain in their own family home and support them to get into accommodation, but we're also looking at supported living arrangements, helping people to rent jointly with friends, etc., etc. So all of the things that any of us would expect to have in place for all of our young people, we are promoting and supporting. And we have been doing quite a lot of work jointly with our, as part of our commissioning agenda, on the making sure that we've got employment agencies coming in to work with us to develop that employment offer early enough for people to make sure that all of those opportunities are being looked at for our young people. So a really ambitious plan, but as people in the room have said, you know, until we are able to see, you know, more people getting into employment, we will be pushing really hard on that. Thank you, Chair.
If I can just add one more bit to that, we've also got what we call a meeting that across children's social care, health, adults and housing, that's trying to map the processes to make sure that we're actually getting the systems better placed to actually support people. That's allowed us to introduce a new tool into our assessment process that identifies the individual housing needs for young people coming through from the age of 14, so we can do that forward planning and inform commissioners about the kind of future demand that's going to be required. And through our new Dorset Care framework, we've actually attracted new providers in the market, which will allow us to broaden the offer in terms of accommodation, because accommodation with support is one of the key challenges we have in adulthood. But the Dorset Care framework has allowed us to expand that offer, and hopefully we'll continue to build on that.
Thank you. Do any members have any other comments or questions? Councillor Azard.
Thank you. I was just wondering, I was just looking at slide 8 here, the early priorities and the scope. I'm really pleased to see that you're actually now got in there that children aged 14 plus requiring support for mental health are going to be included in the and likely to need care support are included in the scope, and the fact that you know, people are at risk of abuse and exploitation are included. I'm not sure if they were included before, but I mean that is really in the scope, and I do hope it's a huge you know, a piece of work to actually include all of these people. And I do hope that obviously the capacity that Dorset Council has will be able to cover that adequately and actually really support these people, so they're not, you know, actually you know, have support to start with and then it drops off, because what's worse is actually saying you're going to have that in the scope and then find out later on that it's not. So I would like to have assurance about that. And the other thing that I wondered at, we had our last full council meeting, we were talking about health and wellbeing boards, and how does actually this fit in with health and wellbeing boards, or how does it interact with the health and wellbeing boards? Because obviously, you know, health and wellbeing is so important. It's not only just the care and ongoing care, but health and wellbeing. And how does that fit in with the health and wellbeing boards? Thank you.
So if I, sorry, excuse me, Chair. If I pick up the first question, then the scope of this work was debated at some length, actually. I think probably last year and into the beginning of this year. Certainly when I arrived as chair, the discussions were well underway about exactly who these changes were intended to benefit. And what you've seen in the report for today absolutely is a kind of united, confirmed present position, and I think reflects across the council and health where the concerns are greatest to ensure that new services actually make the difference that they should be making. So I'm pleased that you've recognised that there are particular groups of youngsters in there for whom we need to be doing much better and making a long-term commitment. It clearly adds to the complexity of the work, but it's been really important early on to be clear who is going to be supported through these changes as and when they're made. I also think, I mean, I hope officers don't mind me saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway, we will keep under regular review the scope of the work just to make sure that everybody who should be benefiting from the redesign of services actually does so. But I think we're in a good position at the moment. There's been consensus about this scope. The Dorset Parent Carer Council, for example, has asked plenty of questions about, you know, are exactly all the right children and young people going to be in there? So I think we're in a good place with this, but we will keep an open mind as the work develops, just to make sure that, you know, we have scoped in everybody that we should. Your question about the health and wellbeing board, I think to use an expression, Councillor, I'm just kind of getting on the road in terms of a wider set of engagement now. So this is the first opportunity I've had to speak with you and your colleagues in this overview committee. And I think there's a little bit of planning that will be done now about the other places that maybe I might need to share a report. But I'm also mindful, because I think my camera is working well enough, that I think there's at least one member of the Health and Wellbeing Board probably in the chamber at the moment. So we have also got read across in terms of people being in more than one board or committee anyway, so that if information is required, updates are required, then that's possible to do so. But I haven't as yet either asked or been asked to go to the Health and Wellbeing Board, but I think that that's a function of where we are in the process, and also coming to this committee is important because of the work you did on the report last year and the views that you took about the changes that need to be made.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Peter Wolfe, Cabinet Member, Adult Social Care and Chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board. If I can pick up a number of those things in passing. The first thing is that Mark talked about the balanced scorecard, and we do attempt to measure progress by a variety of different metrics, and this will be measured here. I'm looking forward to the construction of the balanced scorecard, and I'm looking forward to that coming to both me as the Cabinet member and you as the overview, because I think your review of that will be absolutely critical. I very much doubt that it will be right first time, so I suspect there will be opportunities for development of that scorecard, because it rarely, absolutely gets right. And Tony absolutely said, what does good look like? And the balanced scorecard should help us identify that. My own experience of this area, and we've talked about it being very complex, is that even if you get it right, there will be changes that mean that the situation changes. So this is not a fixed system where you can say, right, we've got a balanced score, it works fine. I am looking forward to that balanced scorecard, because we are looking at an area in a way that many other organisations aren't. So I think this is going to be a little bit new territory. So I think I really appreciate you reviewing it. I'm really grateful for the comments today. Once the balanced scorecard is presented, I was thinking of, in my role as chair, of taking that to the Health and Wellbeing Board, because much of the balanced scorecard will relate to factors such as health inequalities, which are absolutely within the remit of the Health and Wellbeing Board. I am changing the Health and Wellbeing Board in terms of the way it operates, because previously it used to have a lot of reports which were noted and then they just went into a file. And we're trying to move away from a noting and not really doing anything to taking actions. And what I'm looking for is the Health and Wellbeing Board to review the balanced scorecard in terms of their understanding of it, because the Health and Wellbeing Board has partners from GP surgeries, the NHS, ICB, and any acronym you chair to choose. So I think they will add value to that. And I'm grateful for the question, because what you've done is made me think, right, Mark, and by the way, thank you, Mark, because you've done a phenomenal amount of work on this. When the balanced scorecard is in a position for you to talk through it and it's not going through major change, and I don't want to put pressure on you by saying when that is, that's your call. When that comes, I would suggest that I invite you as the chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board and you as the chair of the Birth to Settled Adult Board to come to Health and Wellbeing Board and talk through the balanced scorecard, A, how you arrived at it, and B, to pick up any feedback from the members of the Health and Wellbeing Board. And bear in mind, Chair, I do go to the Birth and Settled Adults Board, so I am actually connected to all, but Jane is also connected, so there's no single point of failure. And I'm quite keen that the balanced scorecard comes back to this committee, because I'm very, very happy that officers are putting a lot of work into making sure that this reflects what it is we should be looking for, and we're going towards the what does good look like. But there does need to be, and I know it's almost a dirty word, but there does need to be a political scan on it as well, because sometimes there are elements that we look at that other people don't see quite so clearly because it's not on their radar, and sometimes they see things that we don't see. So I think together, we'll be able to arrive at a scorecard that reflects something that gets towards but not at. This is like mathematically approaching but never quite getting there, towards but not at a situation where we can say we're getting there. I hope that answers your questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're going to draw this. Councillor Rennie.
Thank you very much. I'm really pleased that, Councillor Rennie, South East Ward in Dorchester, but I'm here as People and Health Vice. Yeah, I'm not got it in front of me. Sorry. Molly Rennie, Dorchester East, but I'm also Vice Chairman of People and Health Scrutiny. That's why I've come this morning, because this is a really interesting piece of work being done. I'm pleased that Councillor Jones asked the question about housing, because we at the moment, with one of your members as well, are doing a deep dive into our registered social landlords and housing. And this has come up during the work that we're doing around supported and accommodation for people to move into. I also went to one of the workshops that was organised around accommodation, And the words Claire used, when families come to a cliff edge, there was 2 families sitting at the table that I was at that had reached and passed the cliff edge. Their children and young people had passed 25 and actually were out of county, only in BCP, but of course when they went, they were within county because they were at Dorset County Council. And I think my question really is, I think we need to, and the scan on it that Councillor Wolf's just mentioned is a point I wish to bring up, because unless we're all aware of what's happening, we could be doing a bit of work outside the box. And how will this all come together? Take, for instance, Councillor Dunseith is on the working group that we're doing with the RSLs. And so I think I'd like to know if working groups can be formed across the scrutiny and the overview, if needed, so as we're not double doing, basically. That was the question.
I think that's probably a question for the chair of this committee and maybe the chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board as well. What I would say to you, Councillor, is if I can be any help in any of the deliberations that are relevant to the board I chair, I just need to be asked.
I'm nervous about forming additional bodies. I'd much rather use the bodies we've got to work collaboratively than have another body. If that's the only way out of it, I'm fine, but I'd like us to think very carefully before we form another body, because you know this committee's worked really well with Care Dorset. We're working well with this, with Birth to Settled Adulthood. So I'm just nervous about it. I'm not saying no, but I'm saying we need to think the governance very carefully, because, you know, it's what you guys do, I think.
I think I didn't make myself clear. It's not another body. It was if a piece of work is being done, like a deep dive, short piece of work, if other committees, members of, could be brought in. So as that way we're working, because we go to other things, all of us. I'm not forming, it's not another body, it's just being more involved if and when we need to be, like even just coming to the meeting like today.
I'm very sorry, Molly, that wasn't my first understanding, so forgive me, but I gave you an honest answer. I'm completely comfortable with that. I think what I do have to say is that chairmen of committees need to think about their forward plans and make them available to all councillors, and councillors need to turn up to committees that aren't just theirs. So I completely agree with you, Molly, but you are one of the few that does, and I would like more to turn up to more, because I'm always happy, but I'm almost putting that back on councillors, because we need to make that clear, but they need to rock up to other meetings so that they can add value, because there's lots of councillors who could have added a lot of value to this meeting today. Now, I know you're really busy, but I'll try and do my bit to flag up those things where I think all councillors should come to. If I can ask you collectively to do the same, I would be grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. And just from the chair of this committee, we're quite happy to bring in other members. As you know, we've done some joint working on other matters, and it's always lovely to see you here. And I know you're a regular attender, Molly, so thank you very much for that. I'm going to move things on. Just first of all, just want to say thank you to Mr. Rogers for joining us and presenting that today, and thank you to members and officers for your contribution. I think it's been really valuable, and we look forward to it coming back to this committee at some point further down the line. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item 8, which is the forward plans. So looking at our forward plan for our next meeting is the 19th of December, which will be bringing the adult commissioning strategy for Care Dorset. And we're also going to be adding on to that one the Dorset attendance strategy. So there'll be two significant items on that. Does anyone have any comments on that meeting? No, okay. I mean, the only thing I want to note is to make sure that day centres are included in that strategy. Councillor Wharf.
Okay, thank you. It wasn't plugged in properly or something. At the moment, the new organisation Care Dorset is reviewing every single premise, all managers, all contracts, and a variety of other issues. And there will be a report, but exactly what that report covers in detail will depend on the progress they make against various of the issues that they find. Yes, day centres will be included. Whether it's to the level of detail that we would like or you would like, I can't promise. I absolutely promise day centres will be included, but there is still a lot of work in terms of re-evaluating contracts, re-evaluating staff, re-evaluating managers. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to add to that if we do have day centres on there, can we have some significant data around the usage and the cost of those, please?
If it's available, yes. What I want to do is make sure, and I'm choosing my words carefully because they are in the middle of taking over a whole series of organisations, staff, functions and contracts. And I want to make sure that that continues in the appropriate way. If Jonathan Price is on board, and he has COVID, so I don't know how he feels, but he's attending. So as far as I'm concerned, he's capable of talking. Jonathan, can you add to the point that I've just made? And if you think I've been a little harsh, please say so. If you want to make some caveats, please say so.
Thank you, Peter. Hopefully you can hear me. No, I think that's pretty much where it is. Obviously, we're 4 weeks into the transfer, so a lot of the sort of early work has been landed well, and we are developing that business plan. So we'll bring forward those plans to overview. They will have an evidence base behind them, Chair, and we'll be open to conversations about the detail of that at that point. But a lot of work being done at the moment, but it will be the entirety of all of those services that are under the Care Dorset envelope. Thank you.
So the answer is as much as we can, Chair, and I get your message. I'm not ignoring it. I'm just making sure you appreciate that they are in the middle of a huge amount of work. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And then moving on to our January meeting, we've got the Adult Social Care Market Sustainability Plan, updated in Children Care Strategy Plan. So again, two significant items on that. We've also got potential for that January meeting. There were 3 things raised on the 8th of September meeting, and I just really would like an update of whether they'll be ready to come to that meeting. And Claire's nodding furiously, so I'll take that all 3 of those items will be able to go on the agenda. She's still nodding furiously. That's good. Thank you. Okay. Any other member comments about our next 2 meetings? Other things that we're aware of that are coming our way is the housing strategy, and that'll be sometime in the new year, but I don't think, looking at George, it won't be our January meeting. No. Okay, thank you. Any other comments on forward plans? Okay, we'll move on to exempt business. There is none. So therefore, thank you very much, everyone, for your contributions today. Another valuable meeting, and we'll close that at 11:21. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.